You know, everybody, my mixes anymore have been sounding really good. And you know, everybody, I'm very proud of how my mixes have been sounding lately. I feel as though after about a half a decade of being on YouTube and mixing literally every single day, that's not a hyperbole, literally every day working on some sort of project, I feel as though my mixing has just gotten to like this next level. And I feel like I've hit like a new echelon over the last give or take year or so. So in today's video, we're going to do two things. One, we're going to walk through how I mix here in 2023, give an updated and revised walkthrough of how I mix. However, two, I want to show you this one trick, this one plugin that has been eluding me essentially for the better part of a half decade ever since I started mixing up until this very point, okay? So what is the one trick that I've always been looking for, or a better way to say it, what is the one characteristic of my mixes that I've always been looking for and that has been eluding me? Well, it is in fact having a huge, consistent, focused, and tight low end. And it just so happens that Slate Digital has released a plugin for the very thing. Let me introduce you all to Infinity Bass from Slate Digital. Now, before we go any further, this is in fact a sponsored video from Slate Digital. They're paying me to share this with you all and to make this video. However, big however, I absolutely love Slate Digital's products, man. You guys have seen them on this channel for several years now. And so anytime that they want to work with me, I'm incredibly honored and humbled, okay? So, yes, this is a sponsored video, but they don't have to pay me if they don't want to. I love Slate Digital so much, and yeah, man, so just take that information and do with it what you will. But if I don't say it enough, I absolutely love Slate Digital. So the icing on top is the sponsored video, but I love Slate Digital, okay? Hope that makes sense. And before we go any further, once again, I'll put a link down below in the description as well as the pinned comment so you guys can read up and potentially buy Infinity Bass as well as any sort of other Slate Digital products, okay? So what is Infinity Bass? Good question. In my own words, Infinity Bass, I would call like a bass enhancer, a bass exciter. It takes your low end in a specific frequency, and when you target that said specific frequency, you can add a layer of depth, punch, warmth, saturation, all just good characteristics of a low end that just make it pump and make it just stand out that much more and makes your mix that much better. Taking a look at Infinity Bass, on the right hand side we have 4 different characteristics: punchy, warm, deep, and phased. We have an amount knob. That's how much we want to affect the low end signal. The frequency is the targeted frequency we want to affect. The character determines the different types of characteristics you want to add into your low end, and then the output gain is obvious, how much signal you want to add or subtract when you're manipulating a certain track or your overall mix. Then in the bottom right hand corner we have a listen section where you can isolate the actual frequency you're targeting, so that's super helpful. So like in case you're unable to actually hear what you're affecting, you can hit that and it just isolates the overall low end that you're targeting. Then you have a bypass switch. Now that I've gotten that all out of the way and I've explained what Infinity Bass is and how it just makes my mixes come to life, I want to do a revised walkthrough in today's video and show you how I'm using a whole bunch of different Slate Digital products and plugins, but I also want to show you where and when I'm using Infinity Bass. Little spoiler alert, I'm using it on the bass guitar, obviously, and the mix bus as well, okay? All right, everybody, so up on your screen right now, we have a Logic project from a demo that I did a couple weeks ago at the time of this video being released, and a mix that I'm really proud of. So I just want to show you what I did, how I did it, all the above. But first, let's play it, let's jam. So in my opinion, I think that hits like a ton of bricks, and I'm super proud of it. It slaps, as the kids say. So first and foremost, let's cut right to it. Let's go to the guitar bus, as I am a guitar player. Let me just solo it, and then I'll show you what plugins I'm using. Let's get to a section that isn't like sounding like alien music. Let's go to a more conventional guitar sound. So I think that sounds really good, man. There's one particular thing that I hear that I've kind of known or noticed over time with my tastes in guitar tone. I really like a lot of high end and a lot of brightness. And there's one little module that I use inside of Virtual Mix Rack from Slate Digital that does that. So if you notice, on my guitar left and my guitar right, completely clean, no plugins, everything's just going to the guitar bus, okay? And on the bus, we have 2 plugins. Very simple. So the first one, the main one doing the legwork, is Virtual Mix Rack. So if you don't know what Virtual Mix Rack is, basically you just have a bunch of different modules, a bunch of modeled analog stuff in the real world, man. And it's really, really in depth, and it's awesome, dude. And if you're not even sure what any of this stuff is, you know, myself included at times, what you can do is you can hover over any one of these modules and it just tells you what it is. So like this one right here, the first one I have is the VCC channel. Basically, it has a bunch of different characteristics of a bunch of different consoles all over the world. So you basically can just select them and then, you know, dictate like how you want the ins and outs to be on the actual module itself. Basically, long story short, it just adds a little subtle color, and it's just kind of, I don't know, it's just kind of cool. I don't know. Then from there, this is where like the legwork of the guitar tone really is, and that is 2 separate EQ modules. Basically, this white one right here is doing the majority, and then this other one right here, this black one's only doing 2 different moves. And we have a high pass at about 100 hertz, just under 100 hertz, and a low pass at 12K, just to get rid of the super low end and the super high end. You know, the 12K is more or less like a safety net, but the low end is really something that I'm really, really conscious of, especially as I've been doing this for quite some time. I almost just carve out all the super low end stuff, like the rumblies and the grumblies, technical terms here. So let me just solo the guitar tone and then bypass this EQ section and focus on the high pass and low pass filters first. So that's just like my main focus, man, that low end. I don't like low end in my guitar signal from a mixing standpoint, like in the room and when you're chugging. Yeah, sure, like crank it up to 10, all your low end. But for a mix, you really don't want any sort of low end. It just doesn't work, unfortunately, because that's not the job of the guitar. That's for like the kick drum and the bass guitar and, you know, all the super low end stuff that, you know, doesn't belong in a guitar. In the actual middle section of this EQ section, we are cutting out the low frequency of 200 because that's where like the palm mutes live. There's another plugin in my signal chain, which we'll get to, just a stock Logic plugin called the multi-pan compressor. That's helping out with that as well. I'm boosting 800 ever so slightly because the guitar is a mid-range focused instrument, just giving it a little bit of a kick in the pants in the mid-range, and then getting a little bit of 4K because 4K is, generally speaking, kind of like nails on a chalkboard. It's high-end, but it could be perceived as a little too brittle, a little too much bad high end, you know, and this is all to taste at the end of the day. So I'll tweak these 3 right here, these 3 sections of the EQ, just so you guys can hear what I'm doing. So if you can hear like the 4K, yeah, kind of like nails on a chalkboard. The 800 low mid frequency, like it adds the mids, but you don't want to go too crazy because then it starts to sound a little, or like a little too boxy, as one would call it maybe. But I do like a little bit. It's just personal taste. And then the 200 low frequency, if you notice when I was cranking it, like it was starting to get really rumbly and grumbly, and it was just kind of making everything turn into a big muddy mess. So let me go to like the breakdown section and twist some knobs here as well, just so you can hear it in a different section. So those are the frequencies I'm dialing in with this EQ module, and then on this other EQ module, I'm only doing 2 moves here. I'm getting rid of a little bit of 300 hertz, like 314 specifically. I think I just did that for taste, honestly, when I was mixing this, and then I gave a little bit of 8K as well, again for that brightness. So just check this out. Like, that's not necessarily the best guitar tone for a mix, but that sounds super heavy when you dial back some of that 300 hertz. So you don't want to get rid of too much, because in the mix it may get lost. Yeah, listen, like when I get rid of that, like the guitar almost disappears. I thought I didn't have something on for a second. A lot of the guitar tone lives in there, so I'm just getting rid of a little bit, but not, anything that will like completely alter the tone. And then from here at 8K, I'm just boosting it just a decibel to give it, again, a little bit more brightness. Sounds super sick, man. And then the last thing in the guitar signal is something I've never really messed with up until very recently. And this is a newer module from Slate Digital, and this is an FG-36A. And basically what it is it's called an exciter. Basically it adds a little bit of harmonics, a little bit of saturation in the high end. And it's like I said 10 million times so far in this video, high end is good for me. I like high end in my guitar tone. Not a lot, just a little bit. So if you notice right here, if you hover over this module right here, all right, makes your top end sparkle with this faithful emulation of one of the most popular exciters from the 1980s. With just 2 knobs, you'll be dialing in the perfect amount of top end shined in seconds. So, just ever so slightly, adding a little bit of excitement. So hear how dark it is without it? And you bring it in, the guitar tone comes to life. It may not even sound all that good, may sound a little too exciting soloed, but in the mix, I just think it sounds pretty solid. Yeah, man, I'm pretty proud of that sound, honestly. And then the last plugin I'm using here on my guitar bus is a multiband compressor from Logic. And basically, in case you're unfamiliar with what this is, you're able to set a certain frequency spectrum and frequency range and compress it accordingly. So in the instance of a heavy guitar tone, you don't want a lot of low frequencies from like give or take 100 hertz to 250, 260, sometimes even 300 depending. Maybe the tuning, maybe just your flavor of the day. But basically, man, when you chug, there's a certain amount of frequency that gets built up in the low end that really muddies everything up. This plugin allows you to control that, contain that, and compress that certain frequency and not across the whole entire guitar frequency spectrum. So check this out. But notice when I'm chugging here that the multiband compressor gets engaged and it only affects that certain range. The rest of these bands are bypassed. They're not even on. They're not even working. So yeah, they're not affecting anything. So now let's go on through the drums, man. Here's my drum sound. I programmed those drums myself. Pretty proud of how they're coming out, man, just like my writing style and everything. But all I'm doing with my drums anymore is I'm just limiting the crap out of them. That's all I'm doing. I can never really understand how or why I couldn't get them slamming and just like sounding like super in your face. So I just grabbed a limiter one day and I just cranked up the gain and then put the output level down so it wasn't like super loud, and it like kind of did the trick, man. So I don't know if that's right or wrong, but like I'm at this point in my life and in my career where it's like, if I like it, it's good, and I don't really care what anybody else does. So this is just how I do my my MIDI drums anymore. I just limit the crap out of them, and it just sounds like unbelievable. It's mixed in-house with the program, but like on the actual fader or the track themselves, I just limit them and they just sound awesome. So real quick, A/B. So basically what's happening there, if you notice, like we're clipping like a motherfucker when I don't have the limiter on. So to compensate that, to make sure I'm not clipping, I just turn up the gain and crank down the output volume or the output level, and there's like no perceived like difference in volume from the limiter on and off, and they just sound super slamming. So that's just something I've kind of come up with over the last like 3 or 4 months, honestly. And like I said, I don't know if that's right or wrong, but I really don't care anymore. And yeah, I just like the way that sounds. All right, now we're getting to the good stuff. So there's going to be a plugin that I haven't shown just yet in this walkthrough, but let's check out what I'm using for bass in Virtual Mix Rack. I'm using the Warm Present Bass, and to the best of my knowledge, I haven't touched this hardly at all. Like it says, there's a little asterisk there. It says I tweaked something, but I know the Warm Present Bass is like my favorite preset with Virtual Mix Rack, and I just grab it and it just sounds cool, man. So here is my bass. So, sounds super awesome, man. I really love the Warm Present Bass kind of preset here. I mean, I obviously tweaked it somewhere along the way, but let me just A/B in it real quick. A lot more compressed and a lot more gnarly sounding. It's the best way I could describe it. But what I also have on my bass track, and this is brand new, is the Infinity Bass plugin from Slate Digital. This thing is the bee's knees, man. This just makes everything just pop, dude. So this is, again, from Bass Guitar Enhancer, a preset that I tweaked. So let me just A/B it real quick. So what this is, man, this thing is literally just to make your bass sound awesome. So there's different types here, different characteristics: punchy, warm, deep, and phased. You have a bunch of different presets here. You have the amount of low end you want to add, what frequency you want to manipulate and color, I guess we'll say, the character of the actual bass low end itself, and then the output gain. So this is cool right here. You can listen to the actual frequency you're listening to, or you can listen to the actual frequency you're affecting. So check this out. So it's literally just adding a little bit more just oomph to the bass. But what's cool is like you can also dictate and change the output gain, because just because you have more low end doesn't mean that's a good thing. So you can like kind of compensate that, kind of gain match that, however you want to describe it. So yeah, man, this thing just really adds a bunch of life to my bass tone. So we've been going over the individual buses and, you know, going over the tracks and stuff like that. I just want to cut right to the chase, man, and get into the meat and potatoes of today's video and or my mix, and just showcase my secret weapon for mixing and what has made my mixes just sound absolutely amazing over the last couple weeks that I've been using this, and that is the Infinity Bass from Slate Digital. This just makes everything just have this insane amount of clean yet like huge low end that like truthfully, man, I've been kind of searching for like my entire career. That's not like a joke. That's not a hyperbole. I'm being serious, man. So check this out. Just hear how like when I turn it back on, man, it just makes just the mix just have this insane amount of clean yet like focused low end that makes it just bump. You know what I mean? Like, and when speaking with Slate Digital, they did mention that a lot of the hip hop and EDM artists are going to eat this up like crazy, but that's not to say that you can't use it for, you know, rock and roll, metal, etc. You heard I had it ever so slightly on my actual bass guitar track. Having it on the mix bus just sounds absolutely amazing. If you notice, I have it after my virtual mix rack, which we'll get to here in a second. This is just like the final dynamic decision, I guess we'll say, in my chain. And then we have a limiter, well, minus a limiter. The limiter is a dynamic decision, but that's just make your shit louder. This is more or less the last characteristics and color decision that I'm making when mixing. And when you have the listen knob engaged, you can hear what's bumping, and that is like essentially just the kick, more or less. I mean, there's some rumble in there with the bass guitar and a little tiny bit with the guitar ever so slightly. The frequency that I chose to target was 117. I don't specifically 117. I couldn't round that up. I'm not sure why. And I chose, I made a preset XRC mix. I just did that for my own sanity and just as a reference point. I took the full mix enhancer and then I kind of tweaked it to my liking. We have different flavors here: punchy, warm, deep, and phased. And if you notice, 22%, that's just kissing it, man. That's not a lot. I don't want to crank this thing because I feel as though it will just like destroy the mix. So it's just ever so slightly, man. It really bumps. And then to show you guys what's going on in my virtual mix rack instance on the mix bus, we have a console right here. Again, same thing as before, just add in some color with, some modulated consoles. Then we just have a simple EQ move of 30 hertz and 19 kHz. Again, safety blanket stuff. I really don't even think anything is touching 30 hertz and below in my track, or 19K and above. Like, it's more or less, truthfully, as just like a safety blanket for me mentally, knowing that I had that on there just in case I missed something. Then we also have the exciter, the FG36A as well, just to add a little bit of sparkle on the high end, ever so slightly. So it's not as intense as it was on the guitar bus, just we're at 2.41. Hear that when I stop the track and bypass it? Just listen to the cymbals and like the crispiness of the guitar and stuff like that. So that's like kind of a trick I learned from my buddy Fernando, the drummer in Lions at the Gate, and the guy who has mixed a lot of my solo stuff. He has a really crispy kind of mix, and I don't know, I took a lot of inspiration from that. From that style that he has. So yeah, just ever so slightly, a little bit of high-end sparkle with the exciter. I think it sounds cool. And then last but not least, the compressor, 4-to-1 ratio, slow attack, fast release, makeup gain, and then a threshold to get it sitting give or take at 3 to 5 minus dBs of gain reduction. That's just kind of what I've been doing for the last several years now. I've messed around with the attack and stuff, but I don't know, I kind of like a slower attack, fast release. Sometimes I have a fast attack, fast release, but 4-to-1, I always kind of like 4-to-1 because, I don't know, if you're going to compress, you might as well. Like, I don't really understand doing it like 2-to-1 or something like that. I know it's subtle, but I don't know. If you're going to compress, man. So that just more or less just kicks on and catches like the heavy snare hits, the tom fills ever so often. So anytime, like, I guess when the limiter is getting pushed on the drum bus, the compressor will then catch that as well. So that's the only real thing I can think of with that. But more or less, it just is, again, rather conservative. I mean, I don't know, one could infer that may be a little aggressive, but long story short, regardless of the characteristics of how I'm compressing, you know, whether it's a safety blanket, it's aggressive, I don't care, man. Long story short, I think it sounds good. I love the compression there, and yeah, 4-to-1 with that threshold, slow attack, fast release. That's just what I like to do. And then last but not least, man, the very last thing I'm doing is adding a stock limiter with 11 dBs of gain to make it sound loud and professional with the output at -1, therefore I'm not clipping. And then after the limiter, the loudness meter is the stock loudness meter from Logic, and I'm sitting at, give or take, -11.8 LUFS, which is pretty good, man. So the perceived loudness, in my opinion, is pretty good, man. It's not super loud, but you know, I'm pushing it by 11 dBs, man. Yeah, I mean, the integrated LUFS meter is reading at like -12, which, you know, the range from the industry standards, depends on who you ask, is like -9 to -12. I'm just repeating what I heard on the internet, being 1000% transparent with you, but I know if I push it too much, it starts to get distorted, and we don't want that. So to me, the perceived loudness is great. I think it sounds nice and clean, and I'm just really, really happy with it. So that, everybody, is how I mix, man. But really, dude, the whole purpose of this video and the whole bread and butter of my mixing anymore is right in here with Infinity Bass. I love this thing so much. I just love how it just makes my tracks slam, and it just adds a level of low end that I never really could get and I never really could find. But this plugin, just on my mix bus as well as on my bass track, but especially on my mix bus, it's like a nice combination of like some hip hop elements but modern metal. Bro, I love it. So everybody, that's going to conclude today's video. Hope you learned something. Like I said in the beginning of this video, having that consistent low end has really taken my mixes up a notch, in my opinion. I feel like I've reached a new level, and I'm just so happy with how my mixes have been coming along, and being able to use Infinity Bass over the last, give or take, few weeks ever since I've had it prior to this video being announced. I'm just very happy that like I found something that I can take and throw it on my mix or on my bass guitar, or in some other endeavor down the road, but I can just throw it on, and I just know I'm going to have a really solid, slamming, and focused, and controlled low end that just makes everything just bump and just sound huge, okay? A huge shout out to Slate Digital for sponsoring this video. Thank you so much. I hope we can work together again down the road. I'll be honored to do so, okay? So everybody, thank you so much for watching. See you guys in the next video. Later.